Europe has been preparing its response to US President Donald Trump's plans to annex Greenland. Representatives from EU states have just finished an emergency meeting in Brussels on Trump's threat to increase tariffs on the countries resisting his plans. The EU Council President says he will convene a special summit of EU leaders in the coming days. Earlier, Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said Europe would not yield to pressure and blackmail. French President Emmanuel Macron urged Europe to deploy its so-called trade bazooka against Washington. Meanwhile, NATO chief Mark Rutte said he'd spoken with the US President about the issue, and he added that he was looking forward to seeing him at the World Economic Forum in Davos later this week. Trump claims he needs Greenland for national security reasons, though his allies reject that claim.
Ice, space, and strategic power. For the United States, Greenland is a gateway to the Arctic, a region growing in military and economic importance as the ice melts and new shipping routes open. The White House's latest attempt to annex the world's largest island is to mount economic pressure on the EU countries that support Greenland's sovereignty. President Donald Trump posted, starting from 1st of February, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands and Finland will be charged a 10% tariff on any and all goods sent to the United States. European leaders have warned against what they call a dangerous downward spiral if the levies are implemented.
We believe that tariffs are always the wrong answer between allies, and in fact, we certainly do not believe that there needs to be further tariffs now.
We have been asking since the very beginning of this to have a constructive dialogue with our American ally and friends, free from social media and headlines and strong words.
Trump argues Greenland is vital to counter Russia. Its location between North America and Russia makes it central to missile defence, Arctic surveillance and future shipping routes. The US already has a military base in Greenland, as well as a wide-ranging military agreement that allows it full access to the island. As Washington signals it's prepared to take what it wants, the island remains at the centre of a global contest, even as its own people insist their future is not for sale.
And DW correspondent Jack Parrott is following the story for us from Brussels. Jack, what can you tell us about the outcome of the meeting of the EU ambassadors? Will the EU enter into a trade war with the US?
Big question. It looks like they're trying to step up their response as much as possible. They agreed to a certain number of points, unity on the fact that sovereign territories must be respected, readiness to defend themselves from any form of coercion, as they term it, and a shared assessment that the tariffs would undermine transatlantic relations. Now, what we know and what came out of these meetings is that the European Council President, Antonio Costa, who has the power to do so, has called an EU summit that will take place this week, meaning that the 27 leaders of the European Union will come to Brussels to sit down and specifically discuss this issue. That, to me, signals a real step up in the seriousness that the European Union is taking this threat by American President Donald Trump to annex Greenland.
Yeah, and I mean, earlier there was a lot of talk about the possibility of using anti-coercion instruments, or the so-called trade bazooka, as the French President Macron mentioned it. The EU could use that to counter US tariffs, but is that a realistic scenario? Will it be on the table at that summit that's coming up?
Yeah, we have to assume that that is one of the reasons why Costa is calling this summit, as it would require the leaders to get together and have this discussion. It's a very serious call from the French President Emmanuel Macron. This trade instrument, it's called the anti-coercion instrument, was actually made really targeted for China when it was fiddling with the economy in Lithuania, an EU member state, because of Lithuania's support for Taiwan. Essentially, this trade bazooka, as it's sort of informally called, would allow the European Commission to up tariffs immediately also to do things like market restriction, foreign investment restriction, public procurement restriction for potentially American companies coming in and working in the European Union. Now, we don't know if they'll go that far, but we do know that the European Union has essentially revamped, to be perfectly honest with you, Monica, they've taken it out of their folder from a few months ago, a 93 billion euro tariffs response to the United States. That we think will come into effect at the beginning of February if Trump moves ahead and tariffs these 8 countries for what they did by sending their soldiers to Greenland in defense of Denmark's claim.
So all of this is about Greenland, and the US already has a strong presence there. It could, as you also told us earlier, just take it, but it hasn't done so. At the same time, the EU insists that Greenland is not for sale either. What now?
Yeah, it's a big question. I mean, when you talk about military, the Americans have the military base on the island of Greenland, the main one, the Pitterfoot base in the very far north of the island. And it's very important to the Americans. There are also accords between America and Denmark from 1951, which say unequivocally that Greenland is a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And frankly, just as context for how Greenland works, all of the different settlements, the cities, are all closed circuit. Nuuk, the capital, is a closed circuit. You can't drive then up to Ilulissat or Sisimiut, one of the other cities. They are all settlements that stay within themselves because of the nature of how the country works, the way that they live on the coastlines, only within about the first 2-3 kilometers before you get to the ice sheet. If America wanted to take Greenland militarily, it certainly could have done so by now. The question is, how earnestly will Donald Trump's White House sit down with European partners, as he says he wants to? Trump says he wants to take Greenland, and that's the ambition. For the European partners, a US takeover of Greenland is an absolute red line. They will not accept it.
All right. Well, to be continued, I'd say. DW Jack Parrock there from Brussels. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Monica.